So after a heartbreaking loss at the hands of the Tennessee Volunteers this weekend, the Alabama Crimson Tide start off this week by going back to the drawing board, and there are several different things they're going to look to work on. You'd have to imagine execution and consistency have got to be near the top of that list, but there's something we've seen over the course of this year that I find to be extremely alarming for Alabama. Something that if they don't get it cleaned up, their season could be over because it's going to be next to impossible to get where you want to go, even if your team is as talented as Alabama's, if penalties keep rearing their ugly head to this degree. Today, we need to talk about the penalty problem that's plaguing the Alabama Crimson Tide, because this is alarming. Before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you concerned by how often Alabama is penalized? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and comment down below, as those interactions are massive. But having said all this, let's jump right into it, because I know the major point of contention coming out of that game on Saturday was the refereeing. And no matter where you sit, whether you're an Alabama fan, whether you're a Tennessee fan, or whether you were an observer that didn't have any dog in the fight, there were some questionable calls in that game. And really, I think it could all best be summarized by the officiating crew forgetting what down it was during the course of the game, which was really wild to see. But this is an issue that's much larger than one game, and in fact, I think the Tennessee game is a symptom of a larger virus. Because over the course of this year, Alabama has consistently had penalty problems. And if we look at the least penalized teams in all of college football, where number one would be the team that gets next to no penalties, and number 131 would be the team that gets the most penalties on a per-game basis, Alabama ranks 128 out of 131 teams, meaning they are one of the most penalized teams in all of college football. And it's something that's really started to creep up over the course of this season and last season. Because over the course of the past two seasons, Alabama has had 4 100-plus yard penalty games, a figure they didn't have from 2003 to 2020 combined. So over 2 seasons, they've already eclipsed as many 100-plus yard penalty games as they had over 17 seasons. That stat comes from College Football Reddit per the user Dogwood Maple. Thank you for that. That was really alarming to see. But we can also look at a larger trend. In 2016, Alabama played 15 games and had 86 penalties. In 2017, they played 14 games for 70 penalties. In 2018, 15 games, 87 penalties. 2019, 13 games, 95 penalties. 2020, 13 games, 78 penalties. 2021, 15 games, 107 penalties. And finally, we get to this year, where through 7 games, Alabama has 66 penalties, and if they play 15 games this year, they're on pace to eclipse 140 penalties on the season. Alabama can go back to the drawing board, they can work on execution, they can work on consistency, and no doubt those are things that are going to show positive results. But at the end of the day, if Alabama is in situations where they consistently keep shooting themselves in the foot, it really doesn't matter how good the execution is on plays where they're not doing it. It doesn't matter how consistent they are, nor does it matter how talented they are if they can't get out of their own way. And that is an issue we've seen not once, not twice, but several times over the course of this year. We can pick the Tennessee game, and like I said, I think that's a symptom of a much larger virus. Now, what that virus is anybody's guess, but it is alarming how often Alabama is penalized to a degree where it's become the norm this year. I mean, you look at Texas, where they had 15 penalties, and they eclipsed that against Tennessee. Alabama has a penalty problem, and it's something that we saw emerge last season, and it's something that has absolutely taken off this season. And usually, penalties to this degree are an indication of lack of discipline. And we don't think of Nick Saban teams as not being disciplined, but at the point where through 7 games they have 66 penalties, and if we look at the teams that are getting the least penalties in the nation, Alabama sits at number 128 out of 131. That's an indication of a team that's not playing with discipline, and there really is no other way to cut it. This is alarming. If you look at how many penalty yards Alabama has racked up this year, it's more yards than their leading wide receiver has. And in fact, if you were to combine their leading wide receiver and their second leading wide receiver, they would only have 20 more yards than Alabama has racked up penalty yards this year. That is something that cannot continue. And if you're this Alabama team, the margin of error is not large enough for you to be able to get away with all of these penalties. And what I mean when I say that is Alabama's offense is still trying to work itself out. Are they talented? Absolutely, an extremely talented unit, but they don't have the consistency and the prowess of the Alabama offense we saw last year or the year before. Now, they sent a lot of guys to the NFL. You might not be able to maintain that level year after year after year. We all understand this, but point being, if you don't have that level of offensive prowess, that really just means you cannot be this undisciplined and give up this many penalties. I think it's alarming that Alabama is 128th out of 131 teams in penalties. That right there was eye-opening when I saw that stat. Because this Crimson Tide team, they've got a lot to work through, but if they can't get out of their own way, it's going to be next to impossible for them to get to the promised land, where they want to go and where they feel like they should go. Is this a talented team? Yes, but this is one of the more perplexing issues I've seen from a Nick Saban Alabama team, because this seems like a problem you wouldn't associate with a Nick Saban coach team. Nick Saban being so much about discipline, and these amount of penalties usually indicate an undisciplined football team, something Alabama has got to clean up. Y'all know the drill. I've got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking about this, because this is an issue I find to be extremely alarming. That's it. See ya.